Anyways, thanks so much, Jay, for that kind introduction, and thank you everybody for coming out on a beautiful, busy Saturday, but thank you for being here. I'm going to talk more about mental health than I am about addiction. I could always manage addiction, but mental health was out of my control several times in my life. So the title of my talk today is From Adversity to Through Destiny. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in a little town in Newfoundland, a little town called Lameline, Newfoundland. And it wasn't very big. It was about 500 people. I'm the youngest of 14 children. And that's trauma in itself some days, but but I really had a great family, and I've always lived my life this way, and I continue to live my life this way. I tell people, if I were to die this very second, life's been amazing. It's just been amazing. It's been beyond all of my dreams. I never, ever imagined that life would turn out the way it has turned out. And I'm just so grateful for it. But I think I'm going to live for another 30-some years, 104, then I'm packing it in. So I was born in Lameline, Newfoundland, November 29th, 1949. And don't forget, November 29th, I like to get gifts on that day. So the town I grew up in, about 105 or 500 people. There's about 300 today. And Newfoundlanders usually move away. There's no work. We have to go away for jobs. So I first left home when I was 15 to go to university. And people say, well, how do you go to university at 15? Well, simple. We only had grade 11 in Newfoundland. I skipped grade 6. My birthday is in November. So I was at university for 3 months before I turned 16. And of course, I'm very ambitious, didn't want to be a teacher like everybody else who was going to university. So I wanted to be an engineer, but lo and behold, I didn't have any background in physics or chemistry. And so I went to see the dean of engineering. He said, well, that's not a problem. You can take tutorials. Well, I already had 15 hours of classes, 9 hours of labs. I was 15, growing, and I needed to sleep. So needless to say, it didn't work out. I flunked out. And after that, I moved to Edmonton. And the reason I moved to Edmonton, I had a $1,000 student loan. So I don't know what that looks like in today's dollars, but that was 1965 dollars. At that time, my dad was 62. And even though I was very irresponsible at school, there was lots of things going on, and I learned to drink. I looked a little older than I was, and the pubs downtown St. John's weren't well lit, and so they would serve you. And so it kind of started there, but my dad was 62, and to me, that looked really, really old. And I said, I'm not going to saddle him with that $1,000 worth of debt. So I moved out here to work with my older brothers, John and Mike Collins. They had a company, lo and behold, it was called Collins Steel. And I worked for them, and I said, I was ashamed to tell them that I had flunked out of university. It was kind of a shameful thing. I'd never failed at any academic thing ever before in my life. And so I said, can I have a summer job? And then when fall came, I said, I need a winter job because I have this loan to pay off. And so I stayed here. I worked hard. I paid off my student loan. I saved a little money to go back to school. And so I'm going back to Memorial University in St. John's for the second time, and this time I'm going to do a degree in commerce. And through all of the circumstances surrounding that, moving back, planning from long distance, trying to get accommodation. So I did get back, I got registered. About 2 months in, I had a full-blown nervous breakdown. I don't know why I got emotional about that, but I ended up in St. Clair's psych ward. I just really didn't know, like my world just turned upside down. And I was there for 6 weeks. I had electroshock therapy, and I started on my road to recovery. My brother John, who's always been a big champion in my life, John flew down and checked in on me, and he made accommodations to come back, and he made a way for me to come back to Edmonton. So through that process, I got back here in the winter of '68, pretty heavily drugged up, sedated. That's what they did within those days, and worked through the winter, and I stayed here till the summer of 1969, and I was feeling pretty good, and what most people do when they recover from mental illness, even if a doctor wants you to take medications, I'm fine, you put them aside. So I got going pretty active again, and ended up leaving Edmonton, moving to Vancouver, worked in Vancouver for the summer, partied hard, drank lots, then left Vancouver, went to Montreal. And Montreal in 1969 was a party on steroids, let me tell you. There was so much action in Montreal, and I was a part of it all. So, the long and the short, when I landed in Montreal airport, I think I had a quarter in my pocket. And my Aunt Mary lived in Verdun. The airport was in Dorval. So, I didn't tell my Aunt Mary I was broke. So I got there, and I'm hitchhiking on the highway coming in, and some biker picked me up and took me to the Verdun overpass, dropped me off, and I walked the last 2 miles to my Aunt Mary's place. I found it, and got a job with Charles English Iron Works in Montreal. I was installing ornamental iron. That was my brother's business here. I learned that, and I got by. And then that fall, I flew back to Newfoundland, went back to Marystown, Newfoundland, and I enrolled in vocational school, welding. 2 months in, another full-blown nervous breakdown. I ended up in the Waterford Hospital in St. John's. Again, I was there for 6 weeks. Again, electroshock therapy. Again, into recovery. And so I stayed at home until the fall of 1971. And I moved back out to Alberta. And lo and behold, I moved in with my brother Max Collins. And Max lived next door to my wife. So we've been married a little over 50 years now. I met Karen on the long weekend of 1971, September long, and had our first date, and we got married on September 15th, 1973. But in between that, I'm not quite sure what happened, but getting overwhelmed, situations of the world, had another nervous breakdown. I ended up in the general hospital downtown. But something happened there. I ran into a wonderful psychiatrist by the name of Carl Blaschko. Carl Blaschko used to do a show on CJCA back in the day. Ask the doctor or something, and he was amazing. And his treatment, something happened because I completely recovered, and I think it was where my recovery came from is my marriage. Our first son was born June 7th, 1974. Jason, and it seemed like it stimulated a response inside of me that caused me just to heal, to be responsible, and I just I never had more than a half an hour of depression since then. That was over 52 years ago. Or 50 years ago. So I'm going all over the place here, but I'm just giving you just that little trail of what happened to me, and in my dealing with mental illness. So for the first 5 years I was married, I was a Boilermaker welder, worked the field, worked construction. And in 1978, I started up a business called Collins Welding. It went broke in 1983. And people said, well, what happened? What happened to the company? Was it the national energy crisis? And I said, no. Well, what was it? And I said, well, the CEO didn't know what he was doing. They said, who was that? Oh, that was me. You know, if you own your stuff, you will recover. If you don't, you'll keep on failing. So I started up again in the spring of 1984, 40 years ago. But there was a big change that happened in my life in 1983. In September of 1983, Karen and I, we both committed our lives to a relationship with God through His Son, Jesus Christ. That was a turning point in our lives. That was a turning point. So, you know, when we went broke in 74 or 73, I was so naive, I put my last $10,000 worth of savings into the bank account. And the Royal Bank went, it's like they swallowed that right now. It was gone. So we ended up, we didn't have enough money to send our kids back to school in the fall of 83. And I went to work for my brother Max at Iron Co. And Karen cleaned a couple of offices. She went down. I had the pair of scissors this morning. I always have a hard time saying scissors. But which she bought 40 years ago. That was one of the things she did. She went and took a hairstyling course, seminar, weekend, and she cut all her hair. She made dresses for the girls. And I went from making $50,000 a year to 24, but we got by. So I cleaned up the mess from the first company. I went down to the credit union. I remortgaged my house. I bought my equipment back from the receiver, and I was on the road. But all during this time, mental illness was gone, but something else came. I got Crohn's colitis. And I battled with that. And I was finally hospitalized in 1992. But in 1994, I got a miraculous healing. All the pain in my body was gone. All the lack of bowel control was gone. There was a man of God from Louisiana. His name was Joel Papel. And he came and prayed for me. And I don't know what happened, but there was a miracle. I was pain-free. And my life was just like totally changed. You know, when you have Crohn's colitis, when you eat, you look around the room and you say, where's the closest bathroom? Because you know that right after you eat, and if someone has it, they'll know. Right after you eat, you got to make a beeline to that bathroom. Otherwise, you're going to need clean shorts, right? And so that's what happened. So 1983... 1984, we started over, and looking through my notes here so that I don't go too far off track. I got 1 minute and 3 seconds left here. I'm going to take 1 minute and 4 here. Six minutes. Okay, 6 minutes. Okay, well, these notes aren't working anyways. Must be. I should have numbered those, right, Larry? I think it's right here, but needless to say, Yeah. I started over in 1984. I got totally healed in 1994 and never had a sickness or pain to 2009. That time I got some severe food poisoning and it did a mess to my body. Seems like someone's trying to kill me all my life. But, you know, these are some of the things I went through. But in 2 years ago, under the management of Jason and Ryan, Colin Steele, I think they did 133 million in sales. They pumped out. They pumped out 8,000 tons of, or 18,000 tons of steel in 8 months for the distribution center for Amazon. And it was amazing. But all that doesn't mean nothing. It's just stuff. It's just stuff. And my daughter Jill is here with Karen, and that's what's important. You know, and my friends around this table, that's what's important. My friends around that table, that's what's important. Because all the rest is just stuff. But I tell the story. I just tell my story to encourage people. I don't care what you're going through. It doesn't matter. The only time you don't make it through is when you quit. And you always got to have this mantra: the game is not over until I win. You got to keep playing the game, guys, till you win. And you know, Winston Churchill once said, success consists of going from one failure to another failure without the loss of enthusiasm. Be enthusiastic about your life. You have to do things poorly before you're going to do them well. You have to be prepared to do things poorly before you do them well. When you got up to walk the first time, did you fall down a few times? Yeah. And then did you quit walking? Well, it's like life is like that, guys. Life is like that. So, you know, don't ever let the shame of failure keep you from reaching your goal. Never let the shame of failure. Whatever you're doing, I'd advise you to do this. Seek God in the morning, ask Him for direction that day, and by faith, keep going forward. And I can guarantee you, you're going to be successful. Surround yourself with a great community. Encourage each other, because this hurting world needs the best version of all of you. So guys, keep up the good fight. God bless y'all. Thank you.